The snow began as a whisper. Soft, innocent, almost tender until it swallowed the road whole. I had been driving for hours through the northern highway, chasing a silence I didn't know how to live without. My GPS blinked and died somewhere after the last gas station. The signal vanished, the world dimmed, and soon it was just me, the wind, and the endless white swallowing every shape that once had meaning. The radio crackled before surrendering to static. That's when I realized I was alone in a place that had forgotten sound. The car shuddered, engine coughing like a dying animal, before giving up completely. I sat still, the frost creeping up the windshield, painting veins of ice across the glass. My breath fogged into ghosts. Outside, the world was all blur and white breath. No horizon. No end. For a while I just stared at my reflection in the window, half awake. Then a gust of wind screamed through the gaps of the door and I knew I couldn't stay inside. Not here. Not in this frozen silence. I wrapped the scarf around my neck, zipped my coat, grabbed the emergency flashlight. The beam was weak, barely cutting through the storm. Still, I walked. Each step sank into snow up to my knees. The world felt like it was erasing itself behind me, every footprint swallowed seconds after it appeared. I thought of the irony, how we spend years trying to leave a mark, yet nature only needs a minute to forget us. The storm thickened. My phone was dead. My fingers stiffened into pain. That's when I saw it. A faint yellow glow between the trees. A window maybe. A cabin? I stumbled toward it, half running, half falling. The snow hit like knives against my face, but the closer I got, the warmer that light became. It pulsed through the dark like a heartbeat. By the time I reached the door, I could barely feel my hands. I banged against the wood. Hello? Anyone there? No answer. I tried again, harder this time. The door creaked open on its own, wind pushing it inward. The warmth inside was shocking. A fire crackled in the corner. Blankets hung by a sofa. For a second, I thought maybe I'd hallucinated everything until I heard it. Footsteps, slow, heavy, coming from the hallway. I turned toward the sound and froze. Standing there, holding a lantern, was a face I hadn't seen in 3 years. Noah. He looked as startled as I felt, his voice caught somewhere between disbelief and grief. Mira. The storm howled outside, sealing the door shut behind me. And just like that, the road disappeared. Noah didn't move at first. The lantern in his hand trembled just enough to spray gold across the rough-hewn walls, the way sunlight flickers on a riverbed when the wind can't decide what to do with the day. Take off your coat, he said finally, voice hoarse. Not a welcome, not a question and instruction. I shut the door. The wind clawed at the wood once before the latch caught. For a moment, all I heard was the feral breathing of the storm and the quieter, steadier breath that must have been my own. He set the lantern on a shelf, crossed the room, and pulled a gray wool blanket from a hook. He didn't offer it so much as hold it in my direction. I took it. The cabin was one room split in half by a stone chimney. On our side, an iron stove, a rough table nicked with old knife marks, 2 chairs that didn't match, and a sagging couch under a nailed-up quilt. On the other side, a narrow hallway leading to a tiny bedroom and an even smaller pantry. Everything smelled like smoke, pine, and something faintly metallic, blood, or maybe old nails and wet wood. How long have you been here? I asked. Since yesterday, he said, feeding another log into the stove. Sparks rose like brittle fireflies. Hunting trail got blocked. Radio says the highway's shut down 20 miles, either way. You picked a bad night to visit the past. The past? It cracked open somewhere in my chest, like thin ice. I tightened the blanket. I didn't know this place existed, I said. It didn't, not to us. He shut the stove and stood, one hand braced on the mantel, as if the room would tilt without him. Noah had always been a fact, disguised as a person. Quiet, stubborn. A gravity you didn't notice until you were already falling. 3 years hadn't changed that. His hair was longer, darker at the ends with damp. His jaw dusted with days of beard. There was a scar at his temple I didn't recognize. A silver thread catching the light when he turned. Sit, he said. You're shaking. Only then did I realize my legs were buzzing from cold. I dropped onto the couch. Heat bled through the blanket, slow as dawn. He poured water from a dented kettle into a tin mug and handed it over. Sip, too fast, and you'll cramp. The water tasted like iron and ash. It tasted like survival. What are the rules? I asked, before I could stop myself. His mouth twitched, a ghost of a smile. Same as always. Heat, water, food. Keep the smoke thin or the flu ices. Don't open the door unless you must. Don't wander. And his eyes lifted to mine. Tell the truth faster than the storm. I looked away. The blanket rasped under my fingers. We've never been good at that one. We weren't good at a lot of things, he said, but we were good at building fires. He showed me where the wood was stacked, how the stove drew best with the vent cracked to fingerwick. He showed me the radio battery box with a stubborn dial end, the corner where the floorboards warped if you stepped too near the wall. You live here? I asked, finally. He shook his head. Just a ranger loner. They leave a key under the rail when storms roll in. Half the time, nobody needs it. The other half, he gestured toward the door. Half the world turns white, and strangers find each other. Strangers. We were 3 years and one vanished road apart from the last day I'd seen him. A hospital parking lot, winter rain like pins, both of us saying practical, terrible things. The kind you say when you think love is a luxury and time alone you can't repay. You hungry? He asked. I opened my mouth to say no and heard my stomach answer for me. He pretended not to notice, moving to the pantry and returning with a loaf of something dark and dense wrapped in paper. A jar of jam the color of late summer, and a wedge of cheese. He cut the bread with a camping knife, careful, even slices. I remembered those hands fixing a squealing hinge in our old apartment, turning the tiny screw until the sound gave up. We ate quietly. The fire spoke for you soft pops, a seethe of heat. After a while he said, "What brought you out here, Mira?" "Noise," I said. And then the lack of it. Work. Life. He nodded like that was an answer. You're safe here. I wanted to ask him how he knew, what right he had to promise anything. Instead I said, "Is there a bathroom?" "Bucket, and the taste for humility," he said dryly, and I snorted despite myself. He showed me the door to the short hall. The lantern light made his shadow taller. Stranger. As I passed him, the space between us shrank to one breath. I smelled cedar on his jacket, and beneath it, something that tugged a muscle memory at the base of my throat. Him, after rain. In the tiny mirror nailed above the wash basin, a woman looked back at me with wind-pink cheeks and eyes too bright. I pressed my palms flat to the basin wood until my heartbeat slowed. Then I returned. He had unrolled a second blanket on the couch and tossed an extra log into the stove. Outside, the wind dragged its claws over the roof. "I'll take the floor," he said. "Don't be ridiculous. I can take it. You just walked through a white wall. The couch is yours." He settled onto the rug, back against the couch, like he used to sit when we watched documentaries too late on weeknights. "You should keep your boots near the stove, but not too close. If they steam, they'll crack." "Copy," I said softly. We listened to the storm try to erase the cabin. It failed. "Do you remember that winter in the city?" he said suddenly, eyes on the flames, when the heat died and we had to boil water on the stove to make the apartment feel like a human body? "I remember you drawing a sun on the window with your finger so the frost had something to do," I said. "And you said his smile looked tired," he murmured. The sun." I almost laughed. The sound got stuck on the way out. He rubbed his palms together as if to warm the memory. The radio crackled. He turned the dial a hair. A voice climbed out of static. "Wind chill, 30 below visibility, near zero repeat. Shelter-in-place rescue teams grounded until dawn." Dawn felt like a rumor someone started to keep us civil. "How long?" I asked. He glanced at his watch. "Midnight. If the forecast's honest, we'll hear rotors at first light." He hesitated. "If the forecast's honest, so..." I tucked my feet under me. "We wait." He didn't answer. The fire braided and unbraided itself. "I didn't mean to find you," I said into the orange quiet. "I know," he said. "I don't know what to say to you." "Then don't say anything that starts with 'I'm sorry' just to fill the air," he said gently. We can save apologies for when they weigh less. Silence again, the kind with a pulse. I watched the ridge of his shoulder rise and fall against the couch. He stretched his legs. The cuff of his jeans rode up, revealing a thin bandage wrapped around his ankle. What happened? I asked before I could swallow the question. He followed my gaze, then tugged the cuff back down. Twisted it yesterday on the trail. It'll hold, Noah. It'll hold, he repeated, and there was that old stubbornness, the one that made me love and hate him in equal measure. I lay back against the couch arm, the blanket up to my chin. The fire painted the ceiling in restless amber. Memory nibbled at the edges of my thoughts, persistent as mice. Tell me a rule I don't know, I said, eyes closed. He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, don't make big decisions at night. The dark lies. I turned my head. And in the morning we find out what the truth survived. The wind lunged. The cabin held. Something outside a branch, a loose piece of tin clapped against the wall and went still. Are you afraid? He asked, almost a whisper. Of the storm? Or of you? I said, and immediately wished I could take it back. He exhaled and a piece of air left the room with it. Both are weather, he said. Both pass. He shifted, and for a second his shoulder brushed my arm through the blanket. Heat throbbed there long after he moved. When I finally slept, I dreamt of a road painted white from the sky down, and of 2 names written in it, before the wind erased them. In the dream, the names bled color, the snow didn't know how to eat. I woke to the sound of something low and wrong. Not the wind. Not the radio. A sound with breath in it. Noah was already sitting up, head tilted, eyes dark. He reached for the lantern and turned the flame down. The room retreated into shadows. Wolves, he mouthed. I swallowed, mouth suddenly dry. The sound came again, closer this time, a long throat scrape of hunger. The cabin answered with a groan like old bones. He raised a finger. Stay. Then he lifted the stove's iron latch a fraction, choking the light down until it was only a dull heart of heat. The room cooled by degrees. The howl slid along the walls, curious. I counted heartbeats like steps on an invisible staircase. After a long minute, the sound moved on, swallowed by the storm's larger appetite. Noah let out a slow breath. He glanced at me, something like apology passing over his face. Sleep, he whispered. We'll need the light when it comes. But if it doesn't? The question surprised both of us. He looked at the blank window, where the world should have been. Then we make our own, he said. And somewhere far above the roof, the night tightened its fist around the world and squeezed, as if to find out what we were made of. Morning arrived without color, just a thinner kind of darkness, the kind that didn't know yet if it wanted to be day. I woke to the sound of the stove clicking, the smell of wood smoke curling into the air. Noah was already up, crouched by the fire, his hands steady despite the cold. Outside, the storm hadn't stopped it, had just grown quieter, like a beast conserving strength. For a moment, I simply watched him. The way he moved hadn't changed, precise, unhurried, like someone who measured time differently from the rest of us. 3 years ago, I would have leaned my chin on his shoulder and whispered something to break the silence. Now, the silence was the only thing that felt safe. He looked up. You were talking in your sleep. My throat tightened. What did I say? Something about roads and names. He slid a tin mug toward me. You always did dream in metaphors. The tea tasted faintly of pine and smoke. Warmth bloomed in my chest, then faded just as fast. You should have woken me. You needed rest. So did you. He smiled, small and tired. I've been resting for 3 years, Mira. Something in me flinched. He noticed, of course he did. Noah always had a cruel gift for noticing the things you wished he wouldn't. He stood and stretched, the motion careful on his injured ankle. We should go over the rules. If the storm clears later, we might have a window to signal. Rules, I repeated. He took a piece of charcoal from the hearth and began to write on a cracked wooden board hanging by the door. Stay warm. Stay inside. Stay visible. Stay honest. Stay alive. He capped the list with a line, stepped back, and looked at me. Number 4's optional, he said, but the rest aren't. I smirked despite myself. You'd think honesty would be the first rule. It used to be, he said quietly. Then I learned people die trying to tell the truth. I set down the mug, and people die from the lack of it. We stared at each other over the firelight, two survivors of different kinds of storms. Are you planning to fix that ankle? I asked. After breakfast. Noah, he sighed. Mira, we're snowed in, not in a hospital. It'll be fine. The way he said fine carried the same weight as every lie we'd ever told each other. I didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, I gathered the blankets, folded them, lined up the few cans from the pantry. Routine, the fragile kind of order that keeps panic away. He watched, said nothing. When the radio coughed, we both turned. Static first, then a thin voice breaking through the frost. Storm path shifting, repeat. Shifting east, visibility expected by dusk. Copy. Noah leaned closer, adjusting the dial. Copy that, he said instinctively, though the mic was broken. Then he froze. Through the static came another sound. Fainter. A second voice, whispering beneath the transmission. Mira, the voice was gone before the syllables finished. My cup slipped from my hand. Hot tea bled into the rug. He turned to me. Did you? I heard it, I said. My voice sounded too calm for the pulse hammering in my chest. You think it could be interference, he said quickly. Too quickly. Or it could be memory. I didn't tell him that the voice sounded like my own. The storm pressed against the cabin walls, testing the seams. Eat something, he said after a while, quieter. We'll need energy if we have to hike out. He didn't meet my eyes. I didn't eat. Later, when he went outside to check the snow line, I found the small metal box near his pack plane, dented, closed with a latch. Inside were photographs, a field, a sunrise, a hand half raised to block the camera, and at the bottom something folded, stained along the edges. A letter, my name on it. I didn't open it, not yet. But for the first time since finding him, I realized this cabin wasn't coincidence. It was a circle closing. Outside, the wind began to rise again. When he came back in, snow dusted his hair like ash. He shook it off, saw the letter in my hands, and froze. Mira, he said, voice low. That's not, I didn't read it. Good, he said. Then, softer, not yet, something flickered in his eyes, fear, or hope, I couldn't tell which. The radio hissed once more. If anyone hears this, a pause. Do not travel alone, there are. Static swallowed the rest. He switched it off. Rule 6, he said, almost to himself. Don't trust every voice that knows your name. The wind had quieted by evening, but the world outside was still a blur of white. It was the kind of silence that made you think sound had frozen midair. Noah sat by the stove, checking the bandage on his ankle. The firelight trembled against his face, half warmth, half ruin. I pretended to read one of the survival manuals he kept on the shelf, but every word dissolved into the same thought, the letter. The one with my name on it. The one he told me not to open. It lay on the table now, edges curled from age and smoke. His handwriting steady, familiar, looked like a pulse captured in ink. Don't, he said without looking up. I wasn't going to. I lied. He smirked. You're still bad at lying. And you're still good at giving orders. We fell into the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, just full. Fire crackled. The storm breathed against the walls. Between us, the letter waited like a loaded gun neither of us wanted to touch. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. It's from before. Before the accident, I figured, I said. He shifted, pain flashing across his features as he adjusted his leg. You don't want to read it? I think I do. No, Mira. You think you want answers. But sometimes the truth's just another kind of blizzard. I stood, then let me freeze. He looked up at me, eyes dark and tired. You always did run into the cold. I reached for the letter. He didn't stop me. The paper was stiff, the ink faintly bled from water. I unfolded it carefully, afraid it might disintegrate in my hands. Myra, if you're reading this, I probably didn't make it to the morning. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. You never owed me that. I just wanted you to know that I left because I was sick. Not a view of myself. They said the treatment might change things. It didn't. I didn't want you to watch me disappear piece by piece. You deserve every season, not just the one that ends in snow. If I don't come back, promise me you'll drive somewhere warm. Somewhere you can breathe without remembering. Don't keep my things. Don't keep the ring. It was never about a ceremony. It was about building something that could survive after us. Love doesn't die, Mira. It just changes shape. Yours, Noah. The words blurred before I reached the end. My tears hit the page and bloomed like frost spreading over glass. When I looked up, he was staring at me. No anger, no defense. Just the quiet acceptance of someone who had already lost everything once. You were sick, I said. He nodded. Still am. But slower. How long? My voice cracked. 3 years ago, they gave me one. He smiled faintly. I've been late ever since. I pressed the letter against my chest, as if holding it there could undo time. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have stayed, he said simply. And I needed you to go. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream. But grief has a way of softening, edges it wears down fury, until all that's left is ache. I sat down across from him, the letter trembling between us. You don't get to decide what I can handle, I said. He exhaled, long and shaky. No. But I got to love you enough to try. We sat like that for a while, the fire shrinking, the storm returning, both of us trapped between what was said and what wasn't. At some point, he leaned back against the wall, eyes heavy. Rule 4, he murmured half asleep. Stay honest. I broke it, I whispered. I know. His voice was fading. But maybe that's the only rule worth breaking. I don't know when I fell asleep. When I woke, the fire was dying, and the world had turned a strange kind of blue. The storm was back, angrier, clawing at the roof like it wanted in. Noah was still asleep on the floor, one arm over his eyes. The letter lay open beside him, trembling in the draft from the chimney. For a moment, I thought about burning it, letting the flames eat what time couldn't. But I couldn't do it, because that letter wasn't just the past. It was proof that once, even in the dark, he'd tried to protect something good. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough reason to survive the night. The night was made of sound. Not music, not words, just the layered breathing of the storm. And beneath it, something else. A low, drawn-out howl that scraped along the edges of the world like a blade over bone. I sat up before I was even awake. The cabin was dark, the fire nothing but red veins pulsing under ash. Noah was still asleep on the floor, his chest rising and falling with shallow rhythm. For a moment, I thought the sound had come from my dream. Then it came again. Longer. Closer. Real. I grabbed the lantern, shielding the light with my palm as I moved to the window. Frost coated the glass in uneven patterns, white veins branching like trees. I rubbed a circle clear with my sleeve. Outside, the snow looked alive. Wind sculpted it into shapes that moved, shifted, whispered. Somewhere in that motion, a shadow passed, large, slow, deliberate. My breath fogged the glass. There it was again. Not one, two. A pair of figures moving through the snowdrift, low to the ground, shoulders rippling. Wolf. For a second, I thought they were coming toward the cabin. Then I realized they were circling. I turned, heart pounding. Noah, I whispered. He stirred but didn't wait. The wolves howled again. And this time it didn't sound like hunger. It sounded like mourning. A sound too human, too broken. Something about it drew me. Maybe it was the same gravity that had always pulled me toward disaster, the need to see what hurt, to understand it. I put on my coat and boots, fastened the lantern, and slipped out the door. The air outside bit through every layer of clothing. The snow was knee-deep again, and the sky had no stars, just a lid of white. Each breath burned. The howling stopped. Silence fell, heavy as a confession. I raised the lantern. The beam caught the shimmer of frost and something darker beneath it, prints. Wolf prints. And next to them, boot prints. Human? One pair. Mine. I knelt, tracing the edge of one with a glove. It was my size, my tread. But I hadn't walked this far. The prints led away from the cabin, into the trees. And when I turned, I saw it, the faint shape of more footprints, crossing mine, vanishing beneath new snow. 2 sets going out. Only 1 set coming back. My pulse thundered in my ears. The lantern light flickered, making the forest breathe in and out. "Hello," I said softly, ridiculous as it was. Only the wind answered, pushing snow through the branches like whispers. I followed the tracks anyway. Step by step, the storm thickened, and soon even my footprints began to blur behind me. At some point, I realized I couldn't hear the cabin anymore. The world had shrunk to a circle of trembling light. That's when I saw something lying in the snow ahead. A torn piece of fabric, caught on a branch. Dark gray, with a familiar tear at the edge. Noah's jacket. My stomach dropped. Noah. The forest swallowed his name. I moved faster, stumbling through the drifts until the trees opened into a clearing. The snow there looked wrong and uneven, sunken, like something had been there and left a memory behind. And then movement. A shape rising from the hollow. Not a wolf, Noah. He was kneeling, one hand pressed to the ground, breath shaking. When he lifted his face, there was blood at the corner of his mouth and something wild in his eyes. "What are you doing out here?" I shouted, running to him. He caught my wrist before I could touch him. "I told you never go outside alone. There were wolves." "There weren't," he said sharply. His grip was cold and desperate. "There haven't been any wolves here for years." I froze. "I saw them." "No, Mira." His voice cracked, low and rough. "You heard them." He turned my wrist slightly toward the snow. The lantern light fell over the ground. Only 1 set of prints led to this clearing. Mine. My mouth went dry. "But your jacket." He looked down at it, expression unreadable. "I lost that days ago." The wind picked up, erasing the edges of everything. He pulled me against him, holding my head against his shoulder. His heartbeat was erratic, faster than it should have been. "You can't listen to everything the storm says," he whispered. "It learns your voice, Mira. It uses it." I wanted to ask what that meant, but his body was shaking not from cold, but from pain. I saw it then, the red blooming through the bandage around his ankle. "You're bleeding," I said. "Frostbite tore it open. We need to go back." I nodded, numb. Together, we stumbled toward the faint glow of the cabin light. Behind us, the snow closed over our tracks until there was no proof we'd ever been there. When we reached the door, he sagged against the frame. I helped him inside, shut the storm out. His skin was ice. I cleaned the wound with melted snow, wrapped it tighter with the last of the gauze. He hissed through his teeth but said nothing. When it was done, he caught my hand and held it, his thumb brushing the back of my palm like a secret. "You broke another rule," he murmured. "Which one?" "Rule 2, he said. "Stay inside." I tried to smile. "Guess I'm consistent." He didn't smile back. His eyes were still on the window, on the shifting white beyond it. "The wolves," I said quietly. "You're sure?" He cut me off, voice barely a whisper. "There are things that remember our names out here, Mira. Not all of them are alive." The fire popped. Somewhere in the distance, something howled again, soft, low, mournful. Only this time, it sounded like us. By the time midnight crawled back, Noah was burning. Not the kind of fever that made you sweat. This was the kind that turned the air around him into glass. His skin was too pale, his lips cracked, his breath catching like matches in wind. I pressed the back of my hand to his forehead. Fire. He tried to sit up. I pushed him down. "Don't," I said. "You need to rest." His eyes fluttered open, glassy and far away. "It's too warm," he whispered. "You're freezing." He gave a broken laugh. Always arguing with the weather. I added snow to the pot on the stove, watched it melt slow as time. The cabin felt smaller, the walls breathing with each gust outside. "Noah," I said softly, "you need to drink." He shook his head. "You shouldn't have come back." The words hit like wind through cracked glass. "I didn't come back. I got lost." He smiled faintly. "That's what love is. A kind of lost." I sat beside him. His hand twitched on the blanket, fingers brushing mine. "Mira," he murmured, "if I tell you something, you have to promise not to fix it." I looked at him. "What do you mean, promise?" "I promise." He stared at the ceiling, voice thinning. "That night the accident wasn't one. My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? He swallowed. I wasn't trying to drive home. I was trying to disappear. The words floated between us. Fragile, cruel, final. I had the pills. The letter. The storm hit before I could. He shut his eyes. And when I woke up, they said it was an accident. That I was lucky. My voice cracked. You call that Mira? He rasped, cutting me off. I didn't want you to see me dying in pieces. I thought if I ended it before you could watch, I'd be protecting you. I couldn't breathe. The fire popped, a sharp, accusing sound. You think disappearing protects people? I said, shaking. You think leaving me was love? He turned his head toward me. There were tears in the corners of his eyes, but he smiled anyway. It wasn't love leaving. It was love staying out of your way, Noah. He gripped my wrist suddenly, hard enough to hurt. It followed me, Mira. What did? His voice lowered. The storm? The sound? The one that says our names? I froze. It came that night. I remember driving into the white, hearing it whisper through the vents. Myra. Like it wanted me to believe you were calling me back. His eyes darted toward the window. It's not just wind. It learns. The radio crackled. We both turned, static. Then, faintly Noah, a voice. My voice. I stood, heart pounding. You heard that right. He nodded, eyes wide. The static deepened. The voice came again, softer, closer, inside the room. Come outside. The lantern flickered. Shadows bent in strange directions. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. Noah, I whispered. That's not me. He tried to sit up again. Don't listen. It wants you to answer, once. His hand fisted the blanket. When I crashed the car, I heard it too. It called until I followed. And when I did, he stopped, chest heaving. I saw you. You saw me? In the snow. You were standing there. But it wasn't you. It smiled like you, but it didn't breathe. The room felt suddenly colder, as if the storm had crept in through the seams. Outside, something brushed against the wall slow, deliberate. I turned toward the window. A shadow passed by, tall and thin, pausing near the door. The handle moved. Once. Twice. Noah's voice cut through the dark. Don't open it. I stood frozen. The handle stilled. Then, faintly, please, Mira, it's cold. It was my voice. Perfectly mine. I clamped my hands over my ears, shaking my head. Make it stop. Noah reached for the radio, turned the dial until the static screamed loud enough to drown it. He looked at me, eyes fierce, despite the fever. It can only enter if you answer. So, I didn't. I sat beside him on the floor, pressing my palms against my ears, the static hissing like fire between us. Minutes, maybe hours passed. The handle never moved again. When the storm finally quieted, I lowered my hands. Noah had slumped sideways, breathing ragged. I touched his forehead, burned hotter. Stay with me, I whispered. He blinked once, barely awake. Rule 4, he murmured. Stay honest. I am, I said. You're not alone anymore. He smiled, faint and broken. Then maybe that's what killed it. What? The storm? He said. It only eats what's lonely. His hand went limp in mine. The storm died before dawn. Or maybe it just moved on, leaving behind a silence so absolute it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Noah didn't wake. His fever had burned through the night, twisting him in and out of dreams. Once, he murmured my name softly, like he was trying to remember how it sounded. Another time, he whispered, don't let it in. Now, he was still. I replaced the damp cloth on his forehead, fed another log to the fire, and waited. The clock on the wall had long stopped ticking. Only the fire moved, cracking gently in the dim orange light. When I reached to straighten the blanket, something slipped from underneath it, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and soft at the edges. Another letter, my name on the outside again, but the handwriting was weaker this time. Evan, shaking, as if written by someone racing against himself. I hesitated. Then I opened it. Mira, if you ever find this, I didn't mean for you to. I wrote it on the second night after the accident, when I realized the world wasn't finished with me yet. There's something I didn't tell you in the first letter. The house, the one by the lake, you remember it. I went back there last winter. The roof still leaks, the paint still peels, but the walls keep the sound of your laughter like a bruise that never fades. If I don't make it through this storm, go there. The key's under the third step of the porch. There's something I left for you. And Mira, if you ever see the snow move when the wind doesn't, don't follow it. It remembers. Love still lives there, even if I don't. Noah. My fingers trembled. I read it again, then again, tracing the lines like they could change if I stared long enough. Go there. The lake house. I remembered at the small cabin north of town where we'd spent our first winter together. The same place he'd painted with his own hands. The same place we abandoned when his illness grew worse. And yet, if he wrote this after the accident, that meant he'd been there live after everyone thought he was gone. I looked at him. His breathing was shallow, but steady. He needed a doctor. He needed a world that existed beyond this snow. I made my choice before I even stood up. I packed what little we had: water, the flare, a few energy bars, his letters. I wrapped him in the blankets and left the lantern by his side. I'll come back, I whispered, my voice trembling as if the walls might remember it for me. I promise. Outside, the morning was pale and sharp. The snow had stopped falling, leaving behind a glassy crust that cracked beneath my boots. The air was so clear it hurt to breathe. The radio on the table flickered to life just as I opened the door. Rescue teams deploying North Sector. Beware of false landmarks. Some cabins may appear. Off-route coordinates not stable. I froze. False landmarks. But there was no time. I needed help. I needed to get him out. The forest was quieter than before. Too quiet. My footprints from last night were gone. The trees all looked the same, bare, black veins scratching the white. Still, I remembered the direction of the slope, the shape of the ridge, the way the sun bled faintly through the clouds. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't behave right here. I stopped to catch my breath by a fallen log. When I looked back, I expected to see a trail. There was nothing. The snow behind me was untouched. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold. I pressed on, following instinct more than logic, until, through the trees, I saw it, a flicker of metal. A road sign, half buried. I brushed the snow away. The letters read, Raven Lake, 2 miles, Raven Lake. The house. I almost laughed from relief. I wasn't far. The wind rose suddenly, swirling snow into shapes that looked almost like footprints, almost like faces. I kept walking, muttering to myself, not real, not real, not real. Then I saw something else, an old wooden signpost, covered in frost, and beneath it, a map nailed to a tree. It showed the forest, the ridges, the old ranger paths. But there was no cabin marked where ours should have been. No road. No structure. Nothing. I stepped closer, my glove brushing the wood. The map was dated 2016, 3 years before the accident, before the cabin existed. A wind tore through the trees, shrieking like laughter. When I turned, the world looked different. The ridge I'd come down was gone. The clearing behind me was gone. And in the distance, faint but clear, I saw smoke. From the chimney. The same cabin. I was back. I stumbled through the snow, running until the shape of it emerged through the fog. The same cracked roof, the same frozen door. The firelight flickered inside. But when I pushed the door open, my breath caught. The room was empty. No blankets, no radio, no Noah. Only the ashes in the stove, cold and gray. And on the floor, near where he'd slept, the second letter, folded neatly, unopened, no handwriting on it at all. The paper was blank. By the time I stopped shaking, it was already night again. Or maybe it had never been day. Here, light felt like a room or something the world spoke of but never proved. The cabin's walls groaned under the weight of the cold. The fire was gone. The air smelled like iron and snow. Noah was gone. His blankets were folded, his coat missing. Only silence stayed. I searched every inch of the room, under the bed, behind the stove. Even outside where the drift rose against the windowsill. No footprints, no sign of him. Only snow, smooth as erased handwriting. I came back inside, breathing hard. My stomach growled, sharp and hollow. The pantry door creaked when I opened it. Inside sat a single loaf, wrapped in paper. Half stale. The last bread. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed, a sound that cracked like glass. Of course, I whispered. Even hunger remembers us. I tore it in half, placed one piece on the table, one beside the fire pit that no longer burned. In case you come back, I said to the empty room. Then I sat, the loaf heavy in my palm. And for the first time since the storm began, I really cried loud enough to fill the cabin with something other than wind. When the tears stopped, I felt light, hollow, but alive. That was when I saw the letter again, the blank one. It lay where I'd dropped it, folded perfectly, edges untouched by soot. On impulse, I turned it over. The back was rough, fibrous, thirsty for ink. If the world kept erasing us, maybe I could teach it to remember. I found the stub of a pencil near the stove. My hand shook as I wrote. If anyone finds this, there were two of us. Noah and Myra. We were here when the road disappeared. He tried to save me, and maybe he did. If I don't make it out, please tell him. I remember. And if the world forgets us, let the snow remember. I folded the letter again, tucked it inside the hollow where the wall met the floorboard. The wood groaned softly, as if accepting the confession. Then, I sat down with what was left of the bread and ate slowly, like it was a prayer. Each bite tasted of salt and ash, and something that might have been forgiveness. Outside, the wind began to rise again. At first it sounded like the storm returning. Then it shaped itself into a voice. Mira, I froze. It wasn't the mocking echo from before. This time it was warm, faint, human. I rushed to the door, pulling it open. Snow blinded me. The wind tore at my coat. Through the white, a figure moved slowly, limping, leaning against the wind like an old friend. Noah. He lifted his head. His face was gray with frost, eyes unfocused, but alive. He stumbled the last few steps, fell against me, his weight knocking the breath from my chest. You left, he murmured. I went for help, I said. The cabinet wasn't here. He pressed a shaking hand to my cheek. I know. It never was. We sank to the floor, the door banging shut behind us. The storm screamed outside, but inside, everything went still. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something smaller, piece of metal, rusted and familiar. The key? The lake house, he whispered. I found it. It's still there. I stared at him. What do you mean? He smiled faintly, teeth chattering. You wrote to me, Mira. In the snow? I followed the words. I didn't. You did, he said. You said if the world forgot, the snow would remember. My throat closed. You found my letter, he nodded. The wall burned down, the cabin gone. But the snow kept your words. His voice broke. It led me back. I pulled him close, his body shaking like a leaf in wind. You're here now, I whispered. You made it back. He smiled, eyes closing. We both did. The storm's cry faded into something softer, almost like breathing. I held him until I couldn't tell whose heartbeat was whose. When I finally drifted toward sleep, I thought I heard the faint crackle of fire again, though I hadn't lit one. The warmth spread slowly, filling every corner of the cabin. And for the first time, it felt like the snow outside wasn't waiting to bury us. It was listening. I woke to the sound of crackling. At first, I thought it was the storm again, the wind, clawing the roof, snow sliding off the eaves. Then I smelled it, smoke. Not the faint, comforting kind that clings to wood and ash. This was sharp, bitter, alive. The air was orange before I opened my eyes. Noah, I whispered, shaking his shoulder. His skin was hot, but his breath was faint. Noah, wake up. He groaned, the sound small, lost in the roar above us. I turned toward the stove, but it wasn't the fire pit. The fire wasn't there. It was in the walls. Thin lines of flame crept through the seams of the wooden planks, glowing like veins under skin. The very place I had hidden my letter was burning from the inside. I grabbed the blanket, threw it over him, coughing. Smoke stung my eyes. The air tasted like ink and salt. The letters. They were burning. I saw it then, charred paper pushing out through the cracks, embers shaped like words before they disintegrated into air. Each spark carried a fragment of a sentence. The snow will remember. We were here. Love still lives. They rose like fireflies, vanishing one by one. I tried to stamp out the flames, to smother them with snow from a metal bowl, but the heat bit through the gloves. The wood hissed, split, screamed. Noah. I coughed, voice raw. We have to go. He stirred, half conscious. The lake, the key. I wrapped his arm over my shoulder. We'll find it later. Not here. Together, we stumbled to the door. The metal latch was burning hot, but I yanked it open anyway. Cold air punched through the smoke, slicing my lungs with ice. Outside, the world was white, so white it glowed. No horizon, no sky, just endless light. I dragged him out, snow swallowing our legs. The cabin behind us roared, the roof collapsing inward with a sigh. When I looked back, the flames didn't look red at all. They were blue, pale, shimmering, almost gentle. Like memory burning itself clean. Noah coughed beside me, clutching his coat. It's beautiful, he rasped. It's gone, I said. He smiled faintly. That's what beauty is. We walked until the smoke became part of the sky. No sound but snow crunching underfoot and our own breathing. I didn't know which direction we were going anymore. The compass needle spun in slow, lazy circles, mocking me. Somewhere behind the fog, the sun was rising. The light made the snow sparkle like glass. Noah stopped suddenly. What is it? I asked. He pointed ahead. There, barely visible through the hay, stood a shape. A structure? At first I thought it was the cabin again, rebuilt from ash. But as we drew closer, the details shifted. The roof steeper. The porch intact. The frozen lake behind it reflecting light like a mirror. It was the other house. The lake house. I fell to my knees, laughing and crying all at once. We made it, I whispered. Noah smiled weakly. Told you. The snow remembers. Inside, the house smelled of dust and pine. Everything was exactly as we'd left it, 2 mugs on the table. A clock frozen at 7:42. The half-painted wall from the year we tried to make it our own. And on the table, under a film of frost, lay a box. Small, wooden, carved with our initials. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photograph cyst by the window, winter sunlight washing our faces. I was laughing. He was looking at me. Behind the photo, folded carefully, another note. If you found this, then the snow kept its promise. This is what I couldn't tell you then. The cabin wasn't real, Mira. It was a memory the storm rebuilt so I could find you. Every time I lost my way, it brought me back to where love ended, so it could learn how to begin again. If the fire came, let it. Fire is how memory breathes. And if the snow still calls your name, follow it once more. It means I'm near. And the paper smelled faintly of smoke, as if it had survived the burning just to arrive here. I turned to Noah. He was sitting by the window, pale but smiling. You wrote this, I said. He shook his head slowly. Maybe once. Or maybe the storm did, using my hand. Outside, flakes began to fall again, slow, deliberate, soft as breath. He leaned his head against the wall. You see it? What? The light, he whispered. The one the fire left behind. I followed his gaze. The snow outside was glowing, faint blue. Shapes flickered within it, letters, sentences, vanishing as fast as they appeared. Our words. The snow will remember. I reached for his hand. It was cold, but his pulse still answered mine. We'll rest here, I said. Just for a little while. He smiled. Just until morning. But morning never came. Only light, spilling through the windows, erasing the shadows, as if the fire had found us again. And in that brightness, it was hard to tell where flame ended and snow began. The light came before sound. It wasn't dawn, it was too bright, too clean, like the world had been washed of its shadows and left unfinished. I opened my eyes and thought for a moment I was underwater. Everything shimmered, weightless, white. The air had no temperature. The floor had no texture. The walls were gone. Noah. My voice fell flat. It didn't echo. I stood. The lake house had disappeared, leaving only an endless expanse of snow beneath a sky the color of light itself. The horizon was a blur, indistinguishable from the ground. I turned in circles, heart pounding. Noah? And then I saw him. Far away, a dark figure walking slowly across the white. His coat lifted in the wind, his steps careful, deliberate. Noah! I shouted again, running after him. My boots sank deep. The snow swallowed every sound. He didn't turn. Each time I blinked, the distance changed. Sometimes he was closer, sometimes farther. And then I realized, his footprints overlapped mine. 2 sets at first, then 1. Mine always inside his, or his inside mine. I couldn't tell anymore. I ran harder, the cold slicing my lungs, but he seemed to move without effort, each step impossibly calm. When I reached him, he stopped. He didn't face me. For a long moment, we just stood there, 2 shadows on an empty page. Then he spoke. Not aloud, but the way a thought speaks before it reaches words. You weren't supposed to follow. I always do, I said, breathless. He turned then. His face was soft, edges blurred by the light. His eyes reflected everything: snow, fire, sky, and nothing of pain. I didn't make it, did I? I whispered. He smiled gently. You did. I shook my head. You're not real. Neither is this, he said. But that doesn't mean it isn't true. The wind rose, carrying faint whispers like pages turning. I saw them then, our words, thousands of them, drifting through the air like ash. The burned letters from the cabin, the ones the snow had swallowed, all floating now, alive, rewriting themselves into the light. If the world forgets us, let the snow remember. The phrase looped, curling through the air before dissolving into white. I reached for him, but my hand passed through his coat like mist. He looked down at me, that same crooked smile I'd memorized years ago. Go home, Mira, wherever it starts again. I shook my head. Not without you. He stepped closer, resting a hand against my cheek. His palm was warm, impossibly so. I'm already there, he whispered. Every time it snows, that's me remembering. Tears slipped down my face, freezing before they fell. He leaned in, kissed my forehead once, soft as breath. Stay warm. And then, he was gone. The light dimmed. The air thickened. I was kneeling in the snow, alone. Only one set of footprints stretched behind me now, winding toward a shape in the distance. A helicopter? Its rotors spun slow, soundless in the white, the rescue insignia barely visible through the frost. A man jumped down, shouting, Miss, can you hear me? I blinked, the world flickering between what was real and what remembered itself. I'm here, I said, or thought I did. They lifted me into the craft. Someone wrapped a blanket around me. Someone asked if I was alone. I nodded. There was another, but when I looked back through the window, there were no footprints left at all. Only snow, smooth, unbroken, and faintly, as the helicopter rose, I saw it written there. Letters traced in wind and frost, glowing for a heartbeat before vanishing. M+N. The snow knew, and that was enough. When I woke again, the world was humming. A soft, mechanical rhythm, steady, almost tender. For a moment, I thought it was the wind. Then I realized it was the sound of machines. The smell hit next: antiseptic, metal, warmth. I was in a hospital bed. A white curtain swayed at the edge of my vision. Someone murmured in the hallway. A heart monitor pulsed beside me, its green light blinking like a distant lighthouse. For a long while I couldn't move. Couldn't even tell if I was awake or still dreaming. Then the door opened. A nurse entered, a young man with kind eyes and snow still clinging to his boots. He stopped when he saw me watching him. You're awake, he said, voice low, careful, as if he might startle me. I tried to speak. The words came out rough. How long? 2 days, he said. They found you near the North Ridge. You are lucky. Lucky. That word again. I swallowed hard. Was anyone with me? He hesitated. The rescue team didn't find anyone else. My chest tightened. Noah, I whispered. His name is Noah. He shook his head. I'm sorry. I turned my face toward the window. The sky beyond was pale gray, the kind of color that only happens after snow. Somewhere far off, I could hear the wind moving through the eaves. He was there, I said quietly. He found me. The nurse didn't argue. He just adjusted the blanket, his expression gentle. Rest. The doctor will want to speak with you soon. He started to leave, then paused. Oh, there was something with you when they brought you in. He reached into his pocket and placed a small, weathered envelope on the table beside my bed. The edges were damp, the writing nearly gone, but I recognized it instantly. My name? The ink had bled, but one word at the bottom remained clear. Noah. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a single slip of paper, brittle and soft, folded twice. I unfolded it slowly, breath caught in my throat. If she lives, tell her. I'm still waiting in the snow. That was all. No signature, no date. Just the weight of those words, heavier than any storm. I pressed the note to my chest, feeling the monitor's rhythm beneath it, the steady pulse of something stubbornly alive. Tears came without sound. Later, when the doctor came in, he explained things I half heard. Exposure, mild frostbite, dehydration. Words that belonged to survival, not to miracles. He asked me if I remembered anything from the storm. I told him about the cabin, the letters, the lake house. He smiled politely, the way people do when they think you're confusing dreams with trauma. There were no structures in that sector, he said gently. Just forest and snow, nothing standing for miles. But I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes when he mentioned one thing, the fire. The strange part, he said, looking down at his notes, was the residue we found near you. Not wood ash paper. Hundreds of small burned fragments. As if someone had been burning letters. I smiled faintly. Maybe they were. That night, after they turned the lights down, I lay awake listening to the machines breathe for me. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, slow, endless. Through the window, the city lights blurred into halos. And in the reflection, just for a moment, I thought I saw him standing outside in the snow, watching. Not cold, not fading, just waiting. I whispered, I remember. And the glass fogged, as if something on the other side had answered. Spring didn't come all at once. It crept in quietly first, as a loosened patch of ice on the river, then as drops of water sliding off the eaves, like hesitant tears. The world thawed one breath at a time. By the time the doctors said I could leave, the snow in the city had already turned to slush. But I couldn't go home. Not that home. There was somewhere else I needed to be. I took the first train north, the same direction the storm had come from. Past the towns, past the empty tracks, past everything that still believed winter was over. When I reached Raven Lake, it was nearly dusk. The air was cold again, but not cruel. The lake was no longer frozen, it moved, slow and silver, like glass remembering how to breathe. I followed the shoreline until I saw it. The old lake house. It stood quietly, half-eaten by moss and time. The door hung crooked, the roof sagged under its own memories. Yet the shape of it was the same thus, same porch, the same third step where he once hid the key. I reached under it. My fingers brushed metal. The key was still there. Inside, the air was dry and still, holding the faint scent of pine and ash. Dust floated through the evening light like tiny ghosts. Everything was exactly as it had been in that photograph there. 2 mugs, the half-painted wall, the broken clock. But the photo itself was gone. I placed my bag on the table and took out the things I had carried for months. The letter they found beside me, and the ring. The ring was small, tarnished, the metal bent slightly from being in the cold too long. Inside the band, a single word was engraved, still. I smiled. Of course you'd write that, I whispered. Outside, the lake whispered against the shore. The world had begun again. I sat by the window until night fell, listening to the water move. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes, the room was glowing. Snow, again soft, unexpected, falling through the last breath of winter. It touched the windows gently, like it was trying to wake the house. I stood and opened the door. The night was quiet, the air pale and kind. The snow fell in thin veils, melting the moment it touched my skin. I stepped outside barefoot, the ring in my palm. The lake reflected the faint stars like scattered memories. And somewhere between one breath and the next, I heard it. A whisper. Faint. Familiar. Mira. I turned, heart still, tears already coming. The snow beneath my feet rippled, shapes forming letters, brief as breath. The snow remembers. I knelt, pressing my palm into the snow, leaving the imprint of my hand beside the words. I remember too, I whispered. You can rest now. The wind sighed through the pines, soft as laughter. Somewhere, I could almost see him by the water, in the light, smiling. For the first time, it didn't hurt. It just felt full, like love had stopped needing proof. When morning came, the snow was gone. The ring lay half buried in thawing earth, glinting against the new grass. I left it there. As I walked away, the lake rippled once, and for just a moment, the reflection in the water wasn't mine. It was his. He smiled. And then the water stilled.